Unfortunately, a lot of folks out there aren't privy to what happened in what we're going to talk about as far as Laura's case. A lot of people aren't privy as to what happened. John Knight had some great testimony that he's had on what he went through, trying to just get a look as an observer. Rich Gallardo made a lot of great statements and made a lot of good points about how he was restricted in his observing. But a lot of times, if you just go out there, people aren't going to know these things, and that don't know these things aren't going to be able to make an intelligent decision. I'm not saying that people can't make a decision like that, but the jurisdiction is that of the Board of Supervisors, and I would think if we got somebody that they selected in with their jurisdiction, they could interpose and nullify that position and get somebody else. Am I right about that?
Amen. Yeah. No, and
okay,
when you're talking about her being a legend, she's a legend in Sacramento, and she's a legend in Washington, D.C. Need I say more?
Yeah, she's a legend of George Soros.
Yeah. So
she got invited to speak.
Certainly not a legend for the true patriots of Shasta County.
Mm-hmm. Talking about true patriots and people who may become legends, we have Laura Hobbs on the line. Laura, how are you, my dear?
Morning. I'm well, thank you.
Good. So we're just beginning to get into your case here, and you can give people a little bit of the background, and then we want an update on what's going on at this time, whatever you can give us. So the party's yours, my dear.
Thank you. So the background is that this case was decided by 14 votes. There was 14 votes that would have enabled me to go on to a runoff in November. There was a lot of problems with the way they conducted this election. They did not apply the random alphabet mandated by the Secretary of State, which would have afforded me the first position on the ballot instead of the third position on the ballot. The first position gives you an advantage of between 3 to 5%, which in the District 2 race would have been upwards of 500 votes, just by the mere fact of being listed first in the name of candidates on the ballot. So that's a big part of what's at issue. We had testimony by election observers as well that were not able to properly witness and observe the election. They could not see the ballots. They could not hear what the election workers were doing. So there was issues of malconduct on that end as well. And that's what the case is about. I feel really confident. Joanna Francesca, the deputy ROV, was on the witness stand as well during the last few days of hearings. And right now, as it stands, the trial will continue on the 25th at 9 a.m.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I know the answer to, and everybody in this room knows the answer to, but why is Long named as the defendant in the case?
That was just merely a technicality. The way the law is written and the way it's stated is if you want to contest an election, you must list your opponent, your running opponent, as the defendant.
Now, what are things looking like as far as your side, and how are things looking? What are the positives at this point that you can actually talk about that Alex Haberbush? It is Haberbush, isn't it?
Yep, Haberbush. I'm very pleased with his representation of this case. He's done an excellent job. The judge, on numerous occasions, threatened to dismiss it, but Alexander skillfully presented the legal reasons why he should not, and the judge listened and responded accordingly. And the case did go on to trial, thankfully. So, what was the other part of the question?
The other part of the question is, part of it was that anything that Alex says that you can reveal that's a positive on the case, anything that you can bring forward, things that happened in your favor, that type of thing that you can reveal. Go ahead.
Right. Well, one of the things is that the defense is arguing that this was not intentional. However, according to the legal standard, it's not necessary to prove intentionality in malconduct. Malfeasance, yes, but in this case we're looking at malconduct, and those are two different legal terms. From what I understand, So that gives us a stronger position. And the fact that Joanna and, well, the other election employees, Anna Rodriguez, have admitted that they did not properly conduct the election by not following the Secretary of State's mandates for the random alphabet draw is also in our favor. So they've admitted guilt. Obviously, there is an individual who's been harmed. In this case, it would be me. And so it's up to the judge to decide fairly what the proper remedy would be. And all that I'm asking is that I continue on to the November election for a runoff election with Long.
You know what kind of threw me about the whole thing, and living in Redding for 47 years, I've been to a lot of Board of Supervisor meetings, City Council meetings. My partner, Wynn, and I have been involved in 2 major court cases. And so we understand a lot of the things that are going on, but what I really couldn't understand is being here and being in District 2 since 1977, I'm trying to figure out how the hell Long got 50% of the vote. I still can't figure that one out. I mean, not that many people knew who he was. Some of us that have been around a long time would know that he was a police officer. I mean, the only thing I can think of that would be legitimate or something you could really maybe say this is the reason why he got so many votes is the rampant crime in Shasta County, the crime and the homelessness, thinking that maybe a police officer could clean this up. And in saying that, the problem is most of those homeless camps, most of that crime, probably 80% of it, is done in the city in the jurisdiction of Redding, not in the county. So even a police officer hired as a county supervisor doesn't have jurisdiction. And it goes back again to the uninformed voter who just really doesn't know, and maybe a lot of people that move here are just happy to be here and out of Oakland or L.A. Anyway, what say you?
Well, that is with the assumption that everything was conducted fairly and accurately, that there was no manipulation of the election. And from what I'm seeing, we have evidence otherwise. The fact that the percentages changed so drastically from the first drop, which was the early election day drop, to the election day drop, and then every subsequent drop of votes as it was updated. It started out that Long had 60% of the vote. Then it went down that he actually only had, I think it was 40%, or, it was a huge drop. It was at least 15 percentage point drop. And so you just, in a random election where the ballots come in at random and they're mailed in at random, they're opened at random by the ROV's office, they're delivered at random by the post office. So in that type of scenario, what you should see is that after you reach a certain number of votes, as the numbers of votes come in, it's harder and harder to change the outcome. So the percentage stabilizes around the number, which would be the will of the people. But in this case, we did not see that. Typically, you have a lot of variation in the beginning and then a flat line. In this case, what we saw was a lot of variation. His percentage started very, very high and then went down and down and down and down and down. And the reason why it just mathematically they call it the law of large numbers is once you have, in this race there was only 11,000 votes cast, but say after 1,000 votes have been cast or even 2,000 votes have been cast, one more vote comes in, it only has 1/2,000th of an effect on the total outcome. So you have kind of diminishing returns as far as the effect of new votes coming in. But when we saw these drops coming in and they were so substantially different from one another, it arose suspicion in a lot of people. Now, this evidence is not going to be heard in the court, but that's something that I think needs to be explained.
Yeah, one other thing, too, that kind of puzzles me, and that is that there are people that are, proponents for Mr. Long, and they're talking about how, hey, you didn't just lose by 14, you lost by thousands of votes. That, Long got 50%, he got thousands of votes. Well, if that's the case, then why doesn't he just say, why spend taxpayers' money, why spend money on this thing? Let's just run again. I'm happy if she goes ahead and runs against me again. Why wouldn't he be confident there, and is that something that that he's kind of looking at right now? What has been any response you can talk about he's had to your court case other than, hey, bring it on, I won by 50%?
That's a very good question and deserves to be answered. He also evaded being served for a very long time, so he was trying to delay and stall the trial from proceeding, which is unfortunate. A public official should have the courage to face such, public servicing of public documents and public scrutiny, right? So I think that the courageous and the right thing to do would be to say, yes, let's go ahead and have a rematch. I'm confident, if I truly am the one selected by the people, then I should have nothing to fear, right? But I think part of the thing is that many people, like you said, just didn't even know who he was. And if given the opportunity to really explain to the people that Alan Long's views are not in line with the majority of Shasta County's views, then I think the people would decide otherwise.
Yeah, again, I don't understand. I don't know if we'll ever understand how he got that amount of the vote. Now, the possibility of a majority might be, but the guy didn't do anything, and that's what kind of bothered me about the whole race. The fact that yourself, Dan Sloan, and even Suzanne, you guys were out more in the public arena. You not so much because you were fairly new, but you got a large amount of votes because you were poignant in what you did. You always had good specificity on what you wanted to do. You never beat around the bush. And I'm surprised, again, I'm really in disbelief that this is legitimate just because nobody knows who the hell the guy is. If you're new to this area, you don't know who that guy is.
Yeah, I did knock on quite a few doors, and a lot of people did not know the other candidates. They were surprised to see a candidate knocking on their door. And they were, honored by that a lot of times, and that was all it took to get their vote. They said, okay, well, you showed up my doorstep, I'm voting for you. But, yeah, I didn't see many Alan Long signs. He didn't take very many public interviews. Yeah. The interviews in which he did take, he said that he trusts the voting machines and the work they do in the elections office. He has no concerns whatsoever, even though a recent Rasmussen poll just came out that said 2/3 of Americans distrust the election systems and the voting machines. But he, however, is completely confident there's nothing wrong. So he's got a lot of views that are at odds with the majority of Americans in general, but also most certainly the majority of Shasta County residents.
Yeah.
Well, and to probably avoiding the being served and allowing, on his behalf, allowing the process to move forward, he's already fully aware that he's going to have to garner even more votes, so that would he be able to secure the votes that were made for Sloan? Probably not. He might get maybe 50% of that, if that. I'm just guessing, just a wild guess. So
we'll get Barrymore's.
And so that would be a wash between the two of you. And then what about Barrymore's votes? How many did she have? So the numbers are there and they're ripe for the picking. And after all this keeps going out and people actually do vote, and more voters are going to vote in a presidential election than they did in the early primary. That is always a given. So you know that you're going to win that, should you be allowed, and hopefully you will be allowed to move forward with that.
Yeah, and I think that, to your point, Wynn, that's a great point. To your point, too, when you look at name recognition, Dan Sloan had a lot more name recognition than Long did. Laura, by the time she got rolling, had more recognition than name recognition. This is just baloney. There was cheating going on. There's just I'll just call it for what it is. I can say it. I'm not going to get in trouble with the judge. And I'll just say it, there was cheating going on. There's no question, no doubt about it. Nobody knew who the hell that guy was. He had 5 signs up in town. Really, at the very beginning of that election, Dan Sloan had signs everywhere. And people knew him because he was out at Simpson. And they knew of you. You were very active in local politics, Laura, really good in the boards of supervisors, things like that. And the conservative vote really began to see you. And then, as things went on, you were very good, very articulate in what you did, and your voting edge grew, but it grew like it should grow. And Long comes out of nowhere. Come on, they cheated. They cheated. I'm just going to say it. You don't have to say it anyway. I'm kind of going off a little bit here, but I'm pissed. I'm tired of this.
Well, and it doesn't just affect the candidates. It affects the citizens.
Right.
It affects the future of the board. It affects the future of our entire county. It affects everything. So if we can stop the cheat, even if the vote comes out different than what we like, if it's done fairly, we can live with that. I'm one of those that, okay, like say I had a campaign, I lost. Okay, if I lost fair and square, okay, I can take that hit, no problem. But if I lose due to the cheat, I have an issue with it. I have an issue with the cheat, not the fact that I lost. I have an issue with the cheat and the cheaters, and that they're being allowed to do that, and we're paying them to do so. That bothers me to the core, because they're being immoral, unethical, and they're just lying to us, and they're committing fraud. So we need to hold them accountable.
Yes, exactly. And every fraudulent vote that gets accepted and counted disenfranchises a legitimate, lawful vote. And that's the problem. That's the crux of the problem here. And I can just explain a little bit of the data, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so one of the things that you get as a candidate is the ballot tracts data, or the vote-by-mail ballot abstract, they call it. And you purchase this. It's part of the voter roll. It costs you $40 each time. Candidates will order it, on a periodic basis. And I ordered that throughout the counting, the 23 days of counting. And I ordered the final copy as well when all the votes were tallied, when all the records have been updated and the official count was made. And what I found was I got a list of voters that did not match the list of votes cast. It was shy of about 500 votes for the whole county, which means these were votes cast that could not be tied to an individual voter. In District 2, there was 167 of those illegitimate votes, where a vote was counted. I don't know, it was basically a ballot that had no name associated with it, right? Mm. So where did it come from? And who cast that? Was it cast electronically through their system? What happened there?
What do they call those? Are those phantom ballots, or what do they call those?
I don't know technically what the name is, but basically the best way to refer to them is a vote that was cast that had no voter attached to it. So this is part of the data that's been excluded from being heard in my trial, unfortunately, because the voter roll data, we have 54,000 people that voted in this election. So that Excel file is, if you were to print it out, it's approximately 20,000 pages.
So the voter roll data is being excluded from the court case, but it's needed to certify the election?
Yes.
What the heck?
I don't think they use it specifically to certify the election. It should be part of the certification process, but it's not, to my knowledge.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So we're seeing this in county after county after county, and in fact, I think Marley Hornick on your program recently did mention this as a systemic problem throughout California.
Right.
Where the numbers are not adding up as they should.
So, Dr. Hobbs, could you shed some light on the batch records and the events that happened in your case with discrepancy around the 100 votes per batch? I think the people would appreciate that.
Yes, I would be happy to. So Joanna got on the stand, and first of all, she testified that the way that they test the machines to make sure they're accurate before counting the election is to take a test deck of ballots and count them by hand. And once they count them by hand, they put them through the machine and they make sure that those two numbers match. And then she went on to explain that when they are prior to tabulating the ballots, they do not count the number of ballots in each batch. She said that they do count them, but they don't record that number anywhere. And that number is just on a slip of paper that gets stored away with the ballot. And then she was asked further, Alexander did an amazing job with her on the witness stand, asking her questions in deposition. And he said, well, we don't compare those two numbers. We don't look at the number that the machine tells us and compare it to the number that we counted for that particular batch. And he said, are you sure you don't compare? No, we don't compare them. She repeated herself. We do not compare. And then he went on to say, well, what do you do? And she then brought up an example where they did the 1% canvass. Now, this is after the election, after the machine tally, rather. And the 1% canvass is where they counted by hand. And they found that there was a particular batch where the machine had told them there was 98 ballots in that batch. But when they did the 1% hand count, they found that there was actually 100 ballots in that batch. So the machine had not credited 2 ballots from that batch. So Alexander Haberbush further questioned her about what they do in these cases where there's a discrepancy. She said the machine is the more accurate count. So if it's off by 2 or 3 votes in each batch, there's no protocol in place to rectify that, to not cause for alarm. No, those are my words. I don't have her exact quotes in front of me, but basically each batch could be off by 2 or 3 votes per batch. And in District 2, we had approximately 117 batches. So you could imagine that number, if not accurate, if off by 2 to 3 ballots per batch, you're talking about 200 to 350 ballots that perhaps didn't even get counted. And so, and then Alexander said, well, by what threshold do you instruct your employees to go back and check? So if it's off by 25 ballots, is that what would then trigger them to do a cross check? And she said, no, we have no threshold. And it was very clear that they had no protocol threshold in place. So there's a big problem about the way that they conducted that election and the fact that they did not have a full accounting of the number of ballots in each batch before sending it through the machine.
Hey, Laura.
Yes?
We're going to have to take a break. Can you stay with us?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
yes,
great. Okay, we're going to take a break, so hold your thought, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Time has come.
For 51.
Let's get it done.
Amen.
Welcome back, everybody. Jefferson State of Mine, broadcasting live from KCNR studios in downtown Redding and streaming live at KCNR1460.com. If you have a question, you can call in to 605-4567, area code 530-605-4567, and we are on our way back to
live radio.
Laura, and now, we might have an announcement here from Catherine Stainbrook. Okay, Kathy, how are you? We're going to take Kathy's announcement first. How are you, Kathy? How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. And you have an announcement to make?
Yeah. So, anyhow, you had said call in at 9:30, so
go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so our precious number 8 grandbaby girl was diagnosed last July with an inoperable brain tumor at the tender age of only 2. And she started chemo last October and recently had a setback, an anaphylactic reaction to the chemotherapy. So we would like to make alternative treatments available for our little gal, as they can be extremely expensive. Little Bear Creek Ranch has generously opened their venue to us to host a fundraiser for a summer hoedown for our little Isla Louise. Chad Bushnell, he's an awesome local country artist from Cottonwood. He will be performing. There will be a raffle auction with supervisors Patrick Jones and Chris Kellstrom. Doors open and music starts at 4 p.m. There will be a barbecue tri-tip with chicken and all the fixins for dinner served at 6 p.m. The cost per person is $40, but if you buy a table of 8, it's only $300.
Nice.
You can drop off any donations for the raffle or purchase your tickets at Jones Fort for now. Or those who'd rather do it remotely can Venmo. That's still being set up. And so good food, good friends, good time for a really good cause.
Really good
Thursday,
cause.
July 11th.
And
Go down for Isla Louise at Little Bear Creek Ranch in Anderson. We hope to see you all there.
You bet, Kathy. Thanks for calling in. And, yeah, folks, we need to reach out and support that. Kathy, go ahead and text me if you guys need more stuff. We can get the word out for getting more auction items. So whatever you need, my dear. And bless you, and our prayers are with you and your granddaughter. And thank you for calling in. So
Thanks, love. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Kathy.
Bye.
Laura.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
We're back.
We're back. Yeah, that was
Great.
that was Kathy. I'm sure you heard the announcement, and it's really.
I couldn't hear it on my end,
Oh,
unfortunately.
you couldn't.
But
Okay.
I see
Anyway,
this
there's a
very best
fundraiser
for my
they're having.
granddaughter, and I hope people will support them.
Oh yeah. The fundraiser should be great. We got the details of that, and we'll be continuing to give the details on that, and we'll get that to Carl Bott too, so he can give
Share
details
that
on
after.
that.
Yep.
You bet. And our next program too. Anyway, Laura, we were talking on a certain subject, and because I have the attention span of a gnat, I kind of forgot it a little bit.
That's
So
all right.
Bring
So,
us back home, darling.
Okay, and basically Joanna testified that 2 to 3 ballots per batch was not significant enough for them to attend to and to make sure those numbers matched, and she was completely reliant on the 1% canvass to draw her attention to any of those mistakes. But of course the 1% canvass does not recount all the batches from that election. And except for the case, not to confuse people, but in Kevin's recall, they did do nearly a 100%, even though they called it a 1% canvass.
Now, didn't they do that in the course of the election when, before they even had it all counted, they were already starting the 1% count again?
Yes.
So they didn't even know what they
100%.
had. So they were counting it twice simultaneously. Is that correct?
Bunch of crooks.
Yeah, well, they counted 100% of what they had at the time. So since it wasn't a 100% recount, they said it was just the 1% canvass. There was no charge to the No on Recall campaign, which I suspect were the ones that requested that recount.
Oh, I'm
so they
sure.
basically got a free recount from the county.
Of course.
Whereas for me, they wanted to charge $8,600 just for the first day.
Oh my goodness.
Well, when Mark
But I
Kent
don't
was
want to
looking
get
at
off
that,
topic.
Mark Kent was looking at that a couple of years ago. It was $11,000 a day for him to do that, and he's like, "Yeah, no, I don't think so."
Yeah, but so what happens when you're off by 2 to 3 ballots per batch? It amounts to quite a lot. I was saying between 200 and 350 ballot difference potentially, and this race was decided by only 14 votes.
Right.
So, if you want people to trust elections, you have to be exact, precise, and accurate. And what she testified to is a lack of accuracy, a lack of record keeping, and cross-checking. So
sounds like bookkeeping 101 was failed by the ROV office. I mean, you debit, you credit, it balances. You know, you figure it out. You know, what you have coming in, what you have going out. And then if there's a discrepancy, you find it, figure it out, and you address it. It just sounds like bookkeeping 101 to me, that they just cannot account for any of what they're doing. And so we shouldn't trust them for doing it.
Yeah, you know, and another thing, too, it goes back to what Kevin Cry was talking about in his program this morning. Well, we should throw this out to the people. The people don't know this stuff. If you are electing somebody and they're a criminal, or they've done something criminally, or it's even an allegation, if people don't know it, they're not going to know any better. They're going to go with the general. I mean, you can't. See, that's one of the problems that we have a lot of times when we elect people who are in a position to where they're smart, but they're pretty green. And it's all you can't demagogue down the road. If you don't know the Constitution, then shame on you. You don't know the California Constitution, you're an elected official, shame on you.
Yeah, you took an oath to both.
And if you don't know what's going on, how can you possibly even understand that? I mean, if you have to understand what your jurisdiction is. And I mean, all this done on the fly and the 5,000 different things, very frustrating. Anyway, Citizen Tim has a couple of things he wanted to bring up to you. Laura? So, Citizen Tim, here's your time. It's a prerequisite that you have to smile. We don't allow people in here that have been weaned on a pickle.
All right. So as a man on the street, I'm a little concerned if there's a batch of 100 votes and only 98 of them are counted, and that comes to be 200 to 300 votes that haven't been counted at all, and we're just looking at one race. Isn't all the races of that same day in question now? Was there other batch errors, and how do we know?
Yep, that's a very good question, Tim, and I appreciate you asking it, because one of the reasons that you can cross-check an election, or one of the ways, I should say, that you can cross-check is through the audit log. However, another thing that Joanna testified is that they do not look at the audit log before certifying the election. The audit log tells you exactly what happened when. It's almost like being an election observer in a way, almost as if you were actually right there watching them. It tells you exactly what buttons were pressed, what commands were given, when the batches were created, how many ballots were in each batch, whether the batch was saved or discarded. So there's issues there. There were batches that I feel could have potentially been wrongfully discarded, which is a whole other issue that we haven't addressed in the courtroom yet, but I feel it needs to be addressed. That audit log is approximately 375,000 lines, and if you print it out, it's approximately 90,000 pages. So that's another document which we had trouble getting admitted to the court as evidence, because typically the judges are used to working with paper documents. They want to know what page it's on. We don't have a page number to direct them to. A lot of times the analysis is a summation of all the data that's on that file. And so you can't just point to page 59, and that's where the problem lies. So that's one of the hurdles we faced in this election contest challenge that we brought before the court.
Okay, hey, Laura, I have a quick question. Why would there be 90,000 lines of data when there are only maybe at most 120,000 ballots cast?
Well, this is an audit log, so every time they press a button, it creates a new line in the audit log. So if they click OK, it's a new line.
Okay.
So we did have a witness testify, and he got qualified as an expert witness for big data analysis because he has plenty of credentials in that area. And he did testify to his analysis of this data. And one of the things he brought up was the time changes, because if you look at the official statement of votes, which Joanna Francesca signed, he notated that 3 of the tabulators, 3 out of 4, had clocks that did not properly update for daylight saving. But if you look at the audit log, it tells you exactly when changes were made to the internal clock. And each tabulator had between 3 and 8 changes made to it. And those changes would vary between minutes to hours to 24 hours. So these were not all in 1 hour increments. You would expect for a time change, you would see one change of 1 hour. But here we're talking about 2 to 8 changes per tabulator of different increments of time. And this is important because the audit log tells you, like I said, what happens when. It should be a record in chronological order that can enable you to go back and audit the election to make sure everything was conducted properly. And one entry, it just doesn't make sense. It says that there was somebody working there in the elections office, I think it was at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., and which, when the clocks are not set properly, it leads to more questions than answers when you're reviewing the audit log.
I've got a question for you. When the Board of Supervisors certified the vote 4-1, is there any teeth to that? Is there anything as far as them certifying it, and do they really necessarily have to, by law, certify the vote for it to even mean anything, or is it just I don't know? Is it just going through the motions? Is there any teeth in that with them certifying or not certifying a vote? And if there is teeth to it, if they did not certify a vote, then what would be the ramifications?
I applaud Patrick Jones for not certifying it. If I were a board member myself and I were asked to certify an election, you have to sign your name that you can certify that, to the best of your knowledge, that the results were true and correct. The board members were all given evidence prior to certification that there were things that were not right about this election, that were not adding up. Audit logs, cast vote records were being held, and they weren't being given to the public to actually do this important auditing prior to the certification. These are all serious red flags that if I were a supervisor, I would not sign my name off to that.
I guess the question is, would it matter? I mean, if they don't certify it or they do certify it, legally does it matter? If they don't certify the vote, does it still go through? I mean, is there any teeth to what they do with the certification? That's the question.
Ultimately, I'm not the authority to answer that. ROV's office will say no, it doesn't matter. That's what they told the board members.
Okay.
I don't believe that. By California law, I believe it's Government Code Section 25201.
Right.
The Board of Supervisors have the authority to canvass all elections.
Right.
So they are the ultimate authority in charge as far as I am concerned. Now, what would happen on the statewide level, I'm not sure if that would then, if the Secretary of State would just accept it and move on, or if it would then lead to a legal contest between the county and the state. I do not know the answer to that. We would have to actually ask an election lawyer or somebody who specializes in that.
No, what you do is you actually do it, and then the state will be coming knocking on your door, and then you'll know whether it's going to be a legal action or not. We just do we do the right thing 100% of the time, and not worry about the ramifications from the state or from all the naysayers. We do the right thing every single time, every action, and elections have consequences. So if you're voting people in, not upholding, things like this, which is huge. This is enormous. This is what the whole game is about, elections. And if we can't even get people voted into our current office that are going to stand up and fight back on this, then what are they doing there?
Exactly. And that's why I'm bringing this case forth, because I can't do a very good job as a representative if I don't fight when I need to fight for what's right and what's correct.
That's correct.
I hope that people will see that.
Well, there's been a lot of talking about, how conservatives eat their own and how we're all fighting amongst ourselves and the Democrats really don't do it. I don't think that's as prevalent as a lot of people, especially in this community and in our county, are making that. I think a lot of it is that, you're either going to do the right thing or you're not. So if you're an elected official and in some people's eyes you don't do the right thing, you shouldn't be criticized. If you don't certify a vote, then that's the conservatives eating their own. If you agree on certain positions of people and you agree with them and they're moderate or whatever, and the conservative people are saying we don't agree with that, are they turning on you? And I think I'm getting a little bit upset about hearing some of our politicians in town talk about the fact that, hey, gee whiz, we all need to get along. So I know, let's have people on from the other side. Let's talk to people on the other side. I'm okay with all that. I'm just saying, hey, if in fact this stuff, this non-certification, all these different things, we're eating our own and stuff and blah, 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 it's just like a lot of times we're talking about city issues and we're in the county. You don't have anything to do with the city issues.
No jurisdiction.
There's no jurisdiction in the city.
Right.
Which is another good reason why because people are uneducated on how things work. And that's not a bad thing. It just is. Well, maybe it's a bad thing. Point being is that it gets very frustrating when your conservative, quote, quote, elected officials, quote, quote, start saying, we're starting to eat our own because somebody doesn't agree with you. And not only that, but what if they prove you wrong?
Yeah.
It's time to come back and eat a little crow and say, hey, I screwed up. So Is there anything else on your court case that you think is going to be really impactful going forward?
Well, I feel like the problem is in our election system is that people who get elected through this system, they never complain. They never say there's something wrong. It's only the people whose contests are jeopardized that actually come forward and challenge the system and challenge the status quo. And I think we need to see more cases like this come forth because the system is not working. The system is broken. It needs to be examined. And I think a court is a good place to hear these cases and to receive justice. And I'm hoping and expecting justice to be served in this case. And this is an expensive case to litigate. I'm proud to say that it's been 100% grassroots funded. If folks want to donate, I'm recommending them to either go to my website or go to lexrec.org, which go to lexrec.org/donate. Right now they're having a matching contribution where anything that you donate will be doubled. Those are the folks that are representing me in court, and that's my biggest need for funds at this moment is for the legal expenses.
Laura, as a member of the public, you've brought up things that are concerning to me where it seems like the votes that are cast by the people are not necessarily accurately counted by the ROV's office. And that, to me, that seems like there's a need for more investigation and that elected officials ought to be very concerned as the people seem to be disenfranchised from their right to elect who they choose to be their supervisors and in other positions.
Exactly, and as Marley Hornick was saying the other day on the program, this is a civil rights issue. If we have our votes cast and they're not counted and properly recorded, we've been disenfranchised, and we're no longer, we need, as this country, we are represented by our representatives, and if we don't have the right to choose our representatives, then we're not living in a free country anymore. So it's a serious issue, and I hope that it will be addressed. And the best way, in my opinion, to address this is to go back to hand counting. And we have an opportunity now for a new ROV in this county. I've looked at the list of applicants, and I believe that Clint Curtis would be the best one qualified. He's got over 20 years of experience going to both sides of the aisle and complaining, saying we need to get rid of these machines, we need to have hand counting, we need fairness and transparency and accuracy. So I support him, and that's coming up for folks who are listening. The interviews will be next week at the Board of Supervisors Chambers. I believe Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, or I'm not sure the exact days, but
no, it'll be
start on Tuesday.
Tuesday and Wednesday are the interview dates.
Okay, Tuesday and Wednesdays.
Yeah.
So,
they moved the regular board meeting up to Monday instead of on normal Tuesday date time. They moved it up to Monday. They're going to do their business then, and then they start the interviews for the ROV on Tuesday, and then whatever they don't get through on Tuesday, they'll carry over to Wednesday, but most likely they'll get through all of them, and then if they have additional questions, they're going to bring them back on Wednesday and ask the additional questions.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get an answer about that. Clint Curtis is an interesting guy. We've interviewed him a couple of times.
Yeah.
And sat down with him a couple of times. And it's funny because all this fix on the machine, we wouldn't even have fixes on the machines, wouldn't have this problem if it wasn't for Clint following that great conservative patriot, Jeb Bush.
Yeah.
And Jeb Bush is the one who put him up to it.
Yep.
And that kind of pissed Clint off, and that's why he left the Republican Party,
Well, and he went before Congress stating the facts. We have the video, and he's willing to share that video when he went before Congress and told them how the cows eat the cabbage regarding using machines years ago. years ago. So before we were actually even using machines here in Shasta County. So truly, we should not be using machines in Shasta County.
Yeah, and whoever they pick, and I'm sure that they'll come to a good consensus. You hope and pray they did. They did with Rickard. I think they did a good job with our, not Supervisor Rickard.
CEO. Mr. Rickard, yeah.
Yeah, they did a good job with him, and I think he's doing a great job.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll have something happen here. We've got about 4 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to add to what's happening with your court case, or anything you want to add, Laura?
Well, I'll just go back to my standard plug that I'm encouraging people at this next election to vote a precinct ballot. Go to the precinct. Leave your envelope at home. Leave your ballot at home if you wish to, but go to the precinct, vote in person, and turn that ballot in naked, not with the envelope, because what happens when you do that is that it delays the results. It won't be counted that evening. It has to go through a checkpoint, and it could be challenged. But if you go and vote in person, there's no way that vote is going to be challenged. Once you sign the poll pad or the paper poll book, your vote has been accepted. So I'm encouraging people to vote a precinct ballot on Election Day. And if you could, if you're able to, donate to lexbrex.org/donate for this cause of election transparency and accuracy, and also potential opportunities to maintain a conservative board majority with the Board of Supervisors. I'd appreciate that very much.
Well, Laura, we want to thank you a lot for coming on, and thank you for everything you do. I hope everything goes well with your dad. We'll be praying for you.
Thank you, and happy Father's Day to everybody.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. I think I'm going to be useless today. How about you, Tim? Going to be useless
today?
What are you laughing about, Christina?
She knows.
I have enough dealing with them, you know. I don't get any respect.
So, Laura, thank you for your time, and we hope to see you back up here shortly.
And thank you, Citizen Tim.
Thank you, Tim, for coming in. Yeah,
he did. It was his first start of the season.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, folks. Looks like we're wrapping it up here. Laura, thanks again.
We do have a caller on the line. I believe we have Alex on the line. Are you there, Alex?
That's right.
You are actually the attorney for Laura Hobbs. Is that correct?
That's correct. I am.
Oh, thank you for calling in. I know we were having some schedule issues, but I do know you wanted to get some of the information out to the people in the North State in regards to before the ROV does some discussion on the topic, I guess.
That's right, and thank you for having me on the show.
You bet. Thank you.
We did, the hearing has gone 2 days so far. We had full hearing on last Tuesday and last Wednesday, and the bulk of our time was taken up with questioning of Joanna Francisca. And I know that your Board of Supervisors is going to be interviewing potential candidates for ROV next Tuesday, and I wanted to let the people know, do with this what you will. I can't tell you how to vote or, who to approve of for ROV, but I can say that Francisca basically admitted that all of the errors that we're alleging for this election had taken place, blamed her staff for those errors after just a little bit of pushing from me, and essentially tried to blame the whole thing on the fact that the ROV's office was overworked, and she claimed underfunded. And because of that, I guess they shouldn't be expected to meet basic protocols or conduct the election in a lawful manner. I was not particularly impressed by that showing. I don't think the judge was particularly impressed by it. And it seems like something the Board of Supervisors would like to know prior to interviewing her on Tuesday. So I wanted to get that message out.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. But she never wanted to take the blame herself. She put it off onto the other workers in the office, huh?
Well, she did admit that she had failed to supervise her employees and she had failed to train her employees. But as far as the actual mistakes committed, so one of the biggest issues we were looking at in our case is the fact that the ROV is required to apply a randomized name order that's provided by the Secretary of State, right, and that failed to get applied. And Joanna did admit that she had failed to perform a final review of the ballots prior to sending out printing and being distributed to voters. But as far as the mistake was concerned, she did blame the fact that the employees of the ROV, made that mistake. She didn't look at it. So, I would say she did take some responsibility, but it was more of a, how was I supposed to do better than that when I was doing 2 jobs and overworked and underfunded?
So what do you think the consequences of that? Let's say that the judge rules in your favor does orders that this somehow be straightened out, and is that putting her name on the ballot in November?
That's right, yes. So, we're not asking that any of Long's votes be taken and handed to Laura Hobbs. We're simply asking that, Long won by 14 votes in this election, and there's very strong case law saying that this ballot name order issue affects a whole lot more than 14 votes, usually around 3.3%. And Laura Hobbs lost by, I think, 0.03%.
Now, when you say won by 14, that's just to get to the runoff. That's not the total votes, because what I'm hearing is that he got a lot more votes than she did. This is just to get her on a runoff on the ballot. So is this a principal thing that you're doing, to make sure they're following the rules, or do you think that she actually has a chance in November to win?
Well, that is, to clarify, that is what constitutes a victory in a primary. Otherwise, if you don't get more than 50% of the vote, you don't go
right.
to an automatic election. You do go to a runoff. So, say he won by 14 votes. That's what we're referring to. We mean he surpassed that 50% margin by 14 votes. But more importantly, Laura Hobbs was the second highest candidate in terms of votes, and when there are new elections held between the 2 highest candidates, even if previously that margin was very wide, there's a reason we have runoffs in those situations. Because a vote for, what's possibly a more popular candidate may become dispersed among 4 or 5 candidates, and when it gets to a runoff, all of those votes consolidate into the same person. So we think she does stand a very good chance that she actually does get into a runoff on this. Historically, that's been very vindicated in cases like this.
Well, because the theory being that she's going to get all of Dan Sloan's votes, and they're all going to run over her.
That's right.
Because that was
Susan Barrymore's
Alan Long, I guess, is a Democrat or a liberal.
That's right. Yeah. Basically, there was one liberal candidate in this race, and there were more than one conservative candidate, and that's why a runoff would have been highly favorable to Laura.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it was interesting that they did a recount for the recall, but they didn't on hers, and they didn't take time to even look at it before they wanted it certified.
That's right. Well, and we have testimony from the ROV's office saying they did not even bother at any point in this election to look at the audit logs produced by the Hart tabulators. Because every action performed by one of those tabulators is recorded into a log. You can go back, you can look at it, you can see exactly what happened in the election. We have testimony from the ROV's office saying they didn't even glance at that a single time until public records requests started coming in. So
do you think this is just
a real failure in administration?
So do you think it's just an oversight? Do you think it's just a mistake, lack of doing their job, or was the fix in?
Well, I think at best it's negligence. We have testimony saying that Francesca knew that this alphabetization thing was a difficult concept for new employees to understand. Nevertheless, she assigned new employees to do this and didn't check their work. If it's not intentional, to me, it looks at best like willful negligence.
Well, you get plausible denial that way for sure.
Well, that's what she's resting her case on. She's saying this was just a mistake, therefore nothing should happen. But to me, the real question is, if the ROV makes mistakes that were clearly preventable and clearly the result of maladministration of the election, why should Laura Hobbs have to suffer the consequences of those mistakes? The ROV's office should suffer the consequences of those mistakes, especially because what we're asking for here is not a real difficult or expensive fix. There's already going to be an election in November. They already would have had to have a runoff for the District 2 supervisor on the ballot had they not certified Alan Long as the winner. This costs nothing to fix this, and we don't think that Laura should be the one that's forced to deal with the consequences here if this error was, as they're alleging now, inadvertent.
Well, I think it's more than Laura. I think the people who are going to suffer the consequences are the voters of the county, because if we're in a district that's overwhelmingly conservative and now we've got a liberal Board of Supervisor in office now due to a lack of accountability at the ROV office, I mean, obviously it hurts Laura, but I think it hurts the county even more so, because that could be the difference between a 3-2 vote down at the Board of Supervisors.
I think that's exactly right, Terry. I think that's exactly right.
No, I'm Mark. Terry's the other guy. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
That's okay. Well, I have a question. Do you think that, I believe, the next court date is June 25th?
That's correct.
That they'll extend it out or push it out more so that if the ruling comes in, they won't have time to print the ballots with Laura on it?
I think that's pretty unlikely. This judge has been very sensitive to getting this case resolved as quickly as possible. I suspect this will be fully resolved either on the 25th or shortly thereafter. You know, the judge may take his ruling under submission, because he may want to be able to consider for a bit and write out a more detailed opinion rather than giving one an open court. But it's not going to be much more than a week, maybe 2 weeks after the 25th is my anticipation.
So, if you guys get this, I mean, why would anybody not rule in, if it's obvious and everybody's admitted, and why would the judge not rule in your favor?
No.
Well, the defendants have actually moved for, they haven't presented their evidence yet, but they've moved for a judgment prior to presenting their evidence, saying we haven't made our case, and their brief, if you read their brief on it, pretty much all they say is, this was an inadvertent error. We have testimony saying the ROV was overworked and underfunded. Therefore, the court ought to excuse this mistake, and a new election is not the appropriate remedy because we didn't intend for these errors to happen, and therefore they shouldn't matter.
So they don't really care if it's fair or correct. They just want to move on, which seems to be the mantra of most of these people that support this kind of crap.
I think that's right.
Yeah, they just want to move on, but if you can't get a fair election out of it, what's the point of having the election in the first place? Why do we even need one?
Well, exactly, and it's a disastrous precedent to rule that way, because what it would suggest is that the ROV can make whatever mistakes they want, be as sloppy as they want in the administration of an election, and as long as they can get people to get up on the witness stand and say, I'm just incompetent at my job and I can't do it right, though I didn't mean for any of these mistakes to happen, then the court's going to roll with them? I mean, they can't possibly be how the law works here.
Well, all you need to do is hire a few fall guys and you can do whatever you want.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what happens, on the next election in November on the 5th, if that was a problem then and nothing happens to him, what makes you think that the election is going to be okay on the 5th?
Well, in other places in the county, in other districts, I mean, if you let this one go, then there's really not a very good election system, period, to begin with.
That's right. Well, it incentivizes a bad election system because there's no remedy. There's nothing to prevent them from having poor administration of the election, because even when you point it out and even when they admit it, nothing happens. That cannot possibly be what the solution is here. Frankly, I find it kind of shocking that that's the defense that they've put on them.
So in their brief,
I don't think it's a very strong defense, and I hope the court is not convinced by it.
So they're asking for summary judgment is what you're saying in their brief, saying we just need to forget this whole thing and move on.
That's basically right. Yeah.
Wow. Unbelievable.
And so in the future, no problems.
Well,
don't question it.
And we've seen what you do. If you question, I've personally said, hey, we need to do a recount. And, at $11,000 a day, which always threw me, because how can we're already paying these people.
That's what I don't understand.
And how can it cost so much to have a recount? And I think they even said something like $6,000 a day or $8,000 when Laura said something about it. So what they do is they price you out of challenging it.
That's right. I mean, legal work is obviously not cheap. Now, we're a nonprofit, and we're doing it a lot less expensively than a lot of other firms would. But the fact that bringing this lawsuit is less expensive for Laura to do than to just do a recount is absurd. Now, we're not convinced a recount would have caught all of the issues with this election, because we think there are batches of ballots and ballots that form a part of the canvas for Laura's election that were not counted. And we put on evidence of that during the challenge. But, the fact that a recount isn't a viable option because it's cost prohibitive is just absurd.
It is.
Well,
yeah.
It's,
when they had the resources and the manpower to do the recall, and they didn't even look at this one and move forward with recounting this, why could they cover the cost of that one but not this one?
Well, I think we've seen a pattern of malfeasance across the board with this whole ORV office to begin with from back in the day. You would think that everybody would want to have an election that was transparent and fair, and I mean how they fought us on the Dominion machines, and I've seen more and more and more stories about how these Dominion machines have been hacked and cheated. We even saw Elon Musk put out an article on it. They got to get rid of them, but in this county, they have fought the conservatives every step of the way on verifying these elections properly and making sure they're fair. And how do we get a Democrat in charge of everything in elections in this county when it's like 68% conservative? That itself tells me something's wrong.
Well, I want to say, because we're going to run out of time, thank you for calling in. I know you're very busy, and it is a Sunday, and happy Father's Day.
Yes, thank you very much.
But you have about a minute or so to get the last things out there and maybe how they can donate.
Yes, well, I did want to make sure that people were aware of what their potential ROV or ROV candidate had testified last week, because I think that is just egregious. The fact that they admit these errors took place and these errors affected the election's outcome, and then nevertheless are contesting this and saying that nothing should happen and we should just move on, I think is pretty outrageous.
Yes, it is.
But Laura does need your help. If you are moved to do that, you could do it on our website. It's lexrex.org/donate. That's LEXREX.org/donate.
And again, thank you for taking the time and discussing with. In the future, if you would like to come back on, we would love to have you.